Jared, it's so good to see you again, man, and welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you, Mark. It's really good to see you again as well. Thanks for having me on.
Time, used to say time flies. These days now it's time zooms
Yeah.
by,
Yep.
and it just seems not that long ago that we were hanging out and doing stuff, and then years passed by, basically.
Yeah, it's been years. It's hard to believe, but yeah, we worked together on executive search and some other, wellness and I think we had some environmental work in there. Yeah, it's been a few years, but I'm excited to catch up. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. So, best way to start, I know you, but they don't, is if you can briefly introduce yourself, mostly like about where you're from, where you are now, family, any intimate thing you've never told anybody before that you want to tell people now about stuff like that, and then we'll get into the business part. How's that?
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll try to break some news for you. Yeah, so I'm Jared, and my background is really in social impact, inclusion, and storytelling, honestly. And grew up, born in New York City, Jewish American family, a couple generations from the kind of immigrant experience. So that was kind of embedded in me in terms of, be grateful for being an American, try to give back. Service was a big part of I'd say even my childhood. And I think also that notion of sort of speaking out and standing up for what you believe in was definitely embedded in me when I was very young. And so moved to New Jersey when I was young. My parents divorced, so I was mostly raised by my mom in terms of the day to day. So she was like kind of go-getter single mom who raised my brother and older brother and I, and he and I were kind of, again, I guess in the water was social justice, social impact, and so when I was 14, became a vegan and started doing animal activism. I guess before it was cool to an extent. And then when I was 16, led a inclusion and sort of diversity group at my public high school in New Jersey, and started doing this program called Anytown, which is part of this great organization called I think it's National Conference for Community and Justice, and they just do great work with young people and really try to inspire folks from all backgrounds to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'd say those two threads of social impact, activism, and inclusion have been part of me forever. And I can dive into any experiences since then, but kind of weaved my way through, college and grad school and law school, and worked for President Obama for a while, and his campaigns, worked in the White House, and then through the reelection, on his reelection campaign as well, doing everything from voter protection and fundraising to community organizing. And then kind of post that experience, started a nonprofit, my first nonprofit around access to justice issues, in part with Warren Buffett's family, and particularly his son, Peter Buffett. And then, kind of doing that work for a few years, really felt like there was a gap in the work I was doing, and feel like politics and policy can only go so far in social impact. And so moved into storytelling over the last really decade, and kind of leveraging the power of filmmaking and storytelling and narrative to harness social change and social impact. So that's what I've been doing for the last almost decade, is doing that work through a nonprofit I started called Movie Karma, and a company I started called A Show for Change, and really working with underrepresented creative talent, creating some films of my own, and some stories of my own, and then just trying to elevate voices who historically have been marginalized, and the stories that they're telling around climate issues, all the way to animal issues, to social justice and more.
Cool. Well, you remind me of Jay Leno when he interviewed Robin Williams, and he told him, "All I got to do is say, 'Hey, Robin,' and there you
They
go."
just go up. Yeah. So I
So
gave you an overview. I gave
you
you a
did.
long overview.
No, that was good. That was good. It's interesting because my two and a half of my sons and my daughter-in-law are vegan, and my two youngest boys were like really competitive hockey players, and after that they switched to vegan. And I'm not vegan, but I eat some fish and then mostly other vegan, and I am. It's fascinating what I've learned from
Yep.
it,
Yep.
and stuff, and how the environment's impacted and all that stuff, which we can get into. But yeah, thanks for that intro. I want to go back a little bit to when you were a kid and a teenager, and were you reading books and watching shows on history? Were you playing video games? Were you organizing people to get make money with a lemonade stand? What were you doing aside from what you said before?
I was, it's interesting. I was, I'd say up until about, when I was 12, 13, middle school was difficult for me, probably it is for almost everyone listening, I imagine. Although, it was interesting. When I was in 8th grade, I had an English teacher I'm still friends with to this day, who, Kevin Holloway, who, was just this great guy who kind of saw in me a creative bent. I wasn't the best student in other areas, but in English, I kind of excelled as sort of I guess as a writer, and as a 13-year-old kid, and but was kind of hanging out with the wrong crowd and was sort of about to veer off course. And so he was one of the people that was like, hey, you're actually a really good writer, and if you do well in this class, basically, like, I'll come to every graduation you have, I will be there. And he has been there. Like, he literally has come, middle school, high school, college, grad school, and law school. He came to all of the graduations I've had. And so I'd say that was a pivotal moment for me. And I got engaged in reading and yeah, reading literature and writing poetry and that. And then, yeah, definitely was a video game kid. I'd say early high school. And, like kind of introverted and kind of not like kind of a B student, I would say, but still loved English, loved literature, loved poetry. But then I would say, the turning point for me was, a few things. One, definitely my mom, kind of being like, hey, like, video games are fun, but I don't know if that's where your talents lie. Maybe you should focus on things that you believe in and are passionate about. And so, yeah. And then I would say I became definitely the activist kid in high school. So definitely all the things I mentioned around, yeah, being the vegan animal activist kid, but also being the kid that was like, kind of trying to look out for people who maybe were marginalized. And I would later learn partially that was because I was a gay kid, but wasn't out, and didn't know really that was part of my identity fully at that time. So I'd say that was kind of me. English was my strong suit, and then and writing, and the other subjects kind of weren't as interesting.
Yeah, I can get that.
Yeah.
Although I was good at math and I hated accounting, and I ended up becoming a CPA. And then I realized when I was at Deloitte, and luckily one partner realized that I might be good at this, but I hate it.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
So with your journey then, tell us, what intrigued you to start with fisheries and wildlife sciences?
Yeah, that was a kind of another thing in my background where it's, people kind of look at it like, what is that? How did that happen? And so, yeah, it was interesting. I through that animal activism part of my high school experience, I had a sense that I wanted to be a veterinarian or want to do something in particularly with wildlife, and just sort of was always intrigued by that sense of adventure, of course, but also just having an impact on making the world a bit more compassionate and kinder. And so applied to a bunch of schools. My brother had went to Cornell. He was kind of my North Star of, hey, maybe I should go there. They have a great vet school. Let me try to get in. Didn't get in, didn't get into Penn, didn't get into some of these schools I applied to. I had great vet school, right? But I applied to the school called NC State, North Carolina, and they had a great vet school too. And so got in there to the Fisheries and Wildlife program, which seemed to just be, hey, that sounds unique and crazy. And, I think I want to focus on wildlife veterinary medicine maybe one day. So I'll just do that. But funny enough, when I went down for that, I think it was the interview or kind of the stage right before I started orientation in North Carolina. I had no family there. I had never been to North Carolina before. I was a Yankee literally from New York, right? I like to say I was the only vegan gay Jewish kid, and within like,
yeah, I think you covered all the angles there.
Yeah, so they literally sat me down and they were like, and just knowing I was vegan, they didn't know kind of the other pieces. And they were like, yeah, you shouldn't come here. They've literally, the head of the department, I was a professor there, was just like, you shouldn't come here. You're not gonna have you're probably gonna have a good experience. You're kind of gonna be the odd man out. But of course that was an invitation for me to be like, I'm definitely coming now. So yeah, I mean, that's how it happened. And I could go into more kind of crazy stories around it. I mean, literally my first day at college, I objected to dissecting a killed animal in zoology class, right? And the professor literally told me again to leave the school, switch my major or leave the school. It's just not going to go well. But of course, that led to me being an activist and causing a whole bunch of trouble. So
well, we'll talk about influencers later, but they influence you in different ways, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, push. It's a push and pull of, yeah. Where you
Yeah, no kidding. So that got you towards public policy and law, and I'd love you to share how you navigated your journey around career and life, because I like the
Mhm.
way you said, vegan, gay, Jewish guy, you can just check.
Yeah, yeah.
So from your initial education, you had some of them you mentioned. I mean, pretty high quality, interesting internships and
Mhm.
engagements and volunteering, and you use those knowingly or unknowingly really well to hone your skill sets and develop
Mm.
relationships. Tell us about the experience of so many of those types of projects.
Sure. I mean, I ended up kind of as a jack of all trades, and having just a lot of, some folks I'm sure listening to this will relate. There's a lot of passions and interests, so I started out in fisheries and wildlife sciences. I started my first organization. I led that organization I mentioned earlier in high school. It was called Affinity Club. That was sort of my first foray into being an entrepreneur. Again, had no idea what that term was at the time. But that's essentially what I was doing. And
Hmm.
then when I got to college, NC State, when I was 19, I started this long acronym of a name, but it was called SPARK. It was like Students Protecting Animals Responsibly and Compassionately. And we were like the animal activist group on campus. Yeah. And so
Are you pouring paint on people with fur and stuff?
what's funny is we did not do that. I think that was the beginning of my political sensibilities. I was like, okay, we're going to be kind of the reasonable group. So we're going to invite, thought leaders, and we're going to have speakers, and we're going to show film screenings about animal issues, and but we're still going to cause some drama and some trouble and try to shift things at the school. And so one of the things I worked on was what we called student choice. So we're trying to get students the option of dissecting in a zoology class like I faced, or using alternative models and non-human or non-animal models they would call it.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the work I started getting into, and then the Iraq War was starting. This was 2020 or 2003. So I was marching off and on campus about opposing the war. I was getting involved in a host of social justice issues, like this group called Men Against Rape Culture is doing great work on sexual violence and masculinity. So just sort of just diving into all these social issues in college, and then joined the student senate. I mean, it was just a panoply of things that I was doing. And my dad once actually said to me, he was like, how do you find the time of the day to do all this? Like, I'm getting tired thinking about what you're doing. And I think so that's kind of I guess the struggle of someone like myself, who is kind of a creative entrepreneur, is, yeah, like it's exciting, it's fulfilling, especially in a school environment where you have some safety net, right? You're studying, you're learning. But that has carried on for the next 20 years of my life of exploring and diving into all these areas. So yeah, I would say that was a key thread for me. And I mean, I can go on, but certainly the other areas I mentioned emerged later. After college, I interned in the U.S. Senate. I was able to give my commencement address. I spoke about global awareness and social impact because I had studied abroad. I mean, it just sort of kept moving to these other areas. And I'd say that my takeaways from those experiences was just sort of being creative, being fearless, and just being curious about the world. I'd say those things have driven me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure you've heard this, how it applies to, in part of my business, candidates that are looking for opportunities. It also applies to just people looking for opportunities. When you're more interested in other people rather than just telling everybody how interesting you are,
Yeah.
it really can lead to a lot of good things.
Yeah, it really can. I mean, I think that sense of service, we would call it a program. I was in NC State, servant leadership, right? And we just had
Right.
MLK Day here, obviously in the US, and that was a big, I know, ethos of Dr. King's life was the servant leadership. And yeah, I think that's true. It's like, how do can you become a good listener and an effective communicator, and someone who is there to serve and give back, as opposed to someone who is there to just do something for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of somewhat of the basis of our firm and what Leaders Who Care is all about. Is they are good listeners and they
Mm.
are interested, and yet they can be leaders at the same time, making
Mm.
decisions. But it's a lot more effective if you're actually listening to what other people are telling you. I know you made one weird decision in joining me a search firm. That was a crazy one.
Yeah.
That you did, but you were a people person, so it kind of made sense, and maybe
Yeah.
we can talk about that again. Who knows? But I want to go to the point of when did that light bulb, if you will, that idea light bulb come on for you to establish a show for change, movie Karma, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I'd say it was a kind of marinating thing within me for a long time, and and I kind of going back to my eighth grade, English class, right, of having this creative bent to me, but not knowing how necessarily to harness it. My mom is a who I obviously, large single mom, as I mentioned, raising my brother and I. She's a cinephile, still is, loves movies, loves storytelling, going back to the olden days of Hollywood. And so that was within me. There was sort of this curiosity of storytelling and its impact that it can have on people and audiences. And so after law school, after I'd started my first nonprofit, I did Second City in Chicago for a year, loved it. So did improv and sketch and just loved it. And kind of then coming to LA about almost a decade ago, I was like, I love all these different social issues I've worked on and all these different causes, but the one thread that I kept coming back to was storytelling. And so started a show for a change, I think 2015, 2016, really with the idea of wanting to produce socially conscious content. So I wrote and directed, acted in a couple, short films and a web series, and kind of really wanted to bring diverse folks together, cast and crew, to tell these stories on things like marriage equality. We did a film on immigration issues and dreamers. We did, so kind of was able to harness that interest in all these social issues through stories, and then launched a film festival, which you're still run, called a Show for Change Film Festival, focused on social impact filmmakers around the world, and that's reached, I think, 51 countries and now 600 plus films. That's been incredible. Yeah. And just seeing all these incredible narrative filmmakers, credible documentarians, that led into now the nonprofit that I created in Lee called Movie Karma, which is really focused on the underrepresented talent themselves. And so we just partnered with HBO Max on a fellowship program last year to empower 12 folks from around the country of diverse backgrounds to learn unscripted TV development and pitch and develop projects. We have a docuseries in development. We have, the film festival. We still have now a podcast called Rewriting Hollywood, which will be spotlight underrepresented talent, have them share their story. So yeah, I think it just sort of, for me, it took me a long time to figure out, obviously well into my 30s, of who am I and what's the kind of unifying thread of what I want to do with my life. And I think a Show for Change and Movie Karma have been one of the ways in which I've been able to do that through story.
No, that's brilliant. And I think you have to kind of go through that journey to really find the right place, right time to hit. And if you hit it in your 30s, it's not like that's old, by the way.
Yeah, it feels that way, but it's not at all. My mom's 80 now. She's like, you're a child. Yeah.
Does she say she gets tired watching and thinking all the stuff you do too? Or what?
she does. Yeah, she does. She's funny. She's she's an incredible mom, and that she's amazed by it and always incredibly supportive. But she's like, man, you gotta, when are you gonna kind of get your due, like, because I think from her perspective, she's like, you're always sort of struggling in terms of you're trying to create something, you're trying to build something, right? And sort of that entrepreneur's dilemma that I think probably parents of entrepreneurs are like, man, it's relentless. You're working hard, but it's like you don't always get the reward from their perspective that they feel like you earned. So
but you do, and it does. Yeah. I have a 95-year-old aunt in Montreal, and
oh wow. Yeah.
And she also says, like, everything's so busy, how do you do that and whatever. But she also said something really profound to me a few times, different times, is she thinks back, and she asks everybody how old they are, like, so everybody's like 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever, kids and all that, and then she says, how do 95 years go by?
Wow.
Just was silent after that, and you see her, she's thinking, how does 95 years go by?
It's incredible. No, my mom said something similar. I mean, she just turned 80. It's almost surreal as she's described. And I think, it's because you look back in your life, like, wow, all those things have happened. And she said actually the other day, she's like, it feels like a different person, in some ways that I did all that.
Yeah, exactly. And especially since so much, just even in our lifetime, has changed, like, incredibly. So it's a very profound thing in a way, or surreal maybe is the better word in that respect.
Yeah, the way that time works. Yeah, the pandemic definitely shifted, I think, a lot of our notions of time, and maybe gave us pause to reflect, a lot of us, on who we are, what we're doing, why we're here. So
Yeah, no kidding.
yeah.
So the fourth industrial revolution. It's really still on. It's all about tech,
Mhm.
AI, now GRP, CHT, and all that stuff,
Mhm.
and open AI. But the fifth is really about humanity that people are talking
Mm.
about. And on our firm, Fifth Element, I mentioned we launched it at the UN headquarters, International Women's Day, but it was on the basis that, as we talked, leaders in their businesses can do much better all
Mhm.
around when they're doing good at the same time. And we combine with our clients impact and talent totally intertwined. And if you hire the right talent that wants to be with leaders that are making an impact, then it just keeps going, and
Mhm.
it keeps sustained. So and inclusion is always a priority. Going
Yeah.
back to your previous points, whether it's a search we're doing or anything, because of what never was obvious before, inclusion actually brings in, who would have thought, great ideas and great
Yeah.
perspectives. I mean, rocket science.
Yeah.
So,
Crazy. Wow. Yeah.
so can you
Right.
expand on how you see your work, and you do a lot of great work, making both an economic and social and probably
Mhm.
environmental impact um, on everybody, on you, on business and their employees, on families. You talked about your mom seeing what you
Mhm.
do, on clients, and even then all the way down to community.
Yeah, I mean, I think those three threads have been key in a lot of work I've done. I guess, by way of some examples, I mean, through Movie Karma, we now spotlight through our film festival, and through our podcast, everything from Oscar winners like Troy Kotzer won an Oscar for being in the film Coda, who's a deaf actor.
That
There's
was
people like,
brilliant.
yeah, who came on and talked about his journey, which is incredible. To Ingenue Ellis, who's an Oscar nominated for her work in King Richard. Talked about her journey as an actor of color, and particularly being a Black actress in Hollywood, and how the challenges she's faced to get where she's gotten, which is incredible. So yeah, I'd say through the stories that we've been able to spotlight, the projects we've been able to spotlight, through our podcast Rewriting Hollywood, to the film festival Show for Change, and other initiatives, I feel like I've been able to lend voice to those different areas that you illuminated, right? So if we had one of many films that stand out that we've spotlighted is a documentary about water issues in Israel and Palestine. And this incredible documentarian interviewed a Palestinian farmer, Palestinian person, and then right across the border, interviewed an Israeli person, and about the way they use water, the way they interact with the environment, and the differences, right, in terms of access and
Did you
resources.
ever touch? I don't want to stop your train
Yeah,
of
yeah.
thought. Did you ever touch base with an organization called Eco Peace Middle East?
No, no, I haven't. I don't think I have. Yeah.
They get the Palestinians, Jordanians, and Israelis working together. They first started working together on water management, just that,
Oh, actually.
to come together. Now they work on energy and whatnot, but all the three people's working together. So it's amazing. So good for them.
Yeah, that's really neat. Yeah, that's the kind of work that he was trying to spotlight. And so, that's just a couple of examples, right? So all these different topics that all of these different films and projects and TV series now touch on, whether it's environment, whether it's social justice, or whether it's other issues. And so that's the way in which I've been able to do it, I would say. And inclusion has been a thread through all of it, because I guess, I come at this from the lens of being just in the LGBTQ plus community, and then just being, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, being different in a few ways, but also being privileged and lucky. Like the barriers that I've experienced trying to make it, quote unquote, in Hollywood as a filmmaker, as an entrepreneur, um, have shown to me that those who come from less privilege and less and have less opportunity have even more barriers. And so that's what's led into, how can we create more projects and stories and spotlight more work that are created by underrepresented voices and marginalized voices, and how can we give them voice? So that's for me how I touch on all these different areas.
Yeah, you're doing fantastic stuff. So congrats
Thanks.
on that. I really love it, and or as we say, we feel you on what you're
Thank you.
doing, man.
Yeah. Thanks.
Um, Last question, but just like we say in LA, I guess, is you want to leave them wanting more so you can do a sequel, right? Type
Yeah,
of thing.
sure. Yeah.
So one client told me this in 2021, and it stuck with me. He said, "Mark, the year 2020 it's flown by slowly. And I thought that's one of those weird sentences, right?
Mhm.
And if you think about it, the last few years have been weird, if, to use
Absolutely.
all whatever other term. But
Yeah.
can you just share what you're most grateful for, considering that, and also what you're most hopeful for?
Oh yeah. I'm certainly grateful for my friends and family. I mean, I think having a support community around me. My husband Nate has been with me for married for over 7 years and together for 14. And we were married actually right after marriage equality became the law of the land through the Supreme Court. And so
Okay.
I'm very grateful for him and the ability to have him as a life partner. And have that be recognized in our society in a way that my our ancestors in the LGBT community obviously didn't have.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my dogs who keep me sane in a way. And I can say I'm just grateful for the people I've met along the way, like you, Mark, honestly, who've really just been encouraging and supportive and be like, all right, you're kind of quirky, you got a weird background, but we believe in you and we'll support you and we'll help you get out more opportunities to grow and learn. And so I'm genuinely grateful for all of that. And I think I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful in a lot of ways. It's funny. I tend to be hopeful, maybe naively hopeful about society and about our world. I feel like even with challenges like climate change or
Yeah.
animal rights issues or racial equity issues, or LGBTQ plus equality and all the struggles that a lot of us are fighting to advance, I feel like I feel very hopeful. I feel like we're generally moving in the right direction as a people, even though there are certainly setbacks. As President Obama often said, like it's not a straight line. Progress is not a straight line. If you look through history, there have been many, many times when we've fallen backwards. But I think overall, we're heading in the right trajectory. The trend line, I think, overall looks good. So that gives me hope.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And you are a little quirky. You're right, actually.
Yeah, definitely very, very weird. Yeah,
But that's one of the things I like. But
thanks.
no, but yeah, I'm grateful that you really are a leader who cares, and you're proving it by what you do. So I really appreciate you sharing it on this, and I look forward to a lot more conversations with you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thanks again for having me on. Congrats also for all the work you're doing.
Thanks, man.